Good evening and welcome to News 10 on My Fox 10. A Paris, Illinois teenager is found guilty of second-degree murder in the stabbing death of his mother. It's a case News 10 has been following for almost 2 years. News 10's Joe Ostrowski was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. He joins us now with more. Joe, fill us in. You just got back.
I did, just within the past hour, actually. And Patrice, well, through the past week of trial, because this has gone on for about a week now, exactly a week now, prosecutors had argued that Terry Payton murdered his mother by beating her, then stabbing her, and stabbing her at that while she was on the ground. Now, the defense had argued that he'd been defending himself, that he feared that she was reaching for a knife and was going to try to attack him, do him some physical harm. And of course, that was the argument that went back and forth over the past 7 days. But today, that argument over the justification for this stabbing death went to the jury. And here's what we found out. After a week of testimony, the trial of Paris teenager Terry Payton came to a close Thursday morning. In their final arguments, both sides focused on one question: whether Terry Payton was justified in stabbing his mother to death back in 2011. The defense had argued that Miss Payton was abusive, that she'd attacked Payton in their home, and that the teen was defending himself. Prosecutors disputed that. They pointed to inconsistencies in his story and evidence that Miss Payton had been on the ground when she was stabbed. Around noon, the question went to the jury. 5 hours later, they returned with a verdict, finding Payton guilty of the lesser charge of second-degree murder. News of the verdict drew tears from Terry Payton's family and friends.
We're disappointed, but we realize what a difficult decision it was for the jury. Their decision, I think, really came down to whether his actions were reasonable. It's a fair reading of the jury's verdict that they did not think they were reasonable, but that they did think that he believed he was acting in self-defense.
State's Attorney Mark Isif had his own perspective.
No, I think today was a culmination of basically it's a family tragedy. Tragedy to the community, tragedy to that family, and certainly respect the jury's decision.
Now the question will be what sentence Payton will face. Under Illinois law, he could face a maximum of 20 years, though he could serve much less.
We'll try to get him what we think is a fair sentence. This charge carries probation. The young man has no previous criminal record, and we don't think he's a danger to the community.
It'll be up to the judge to decide, based upon a bunch of aggravating or mitigating factors, and what the appropriate sentence is.
And of course, as for Terry Payton himself, he is back in custody of police this hour.
You mentioned 20 years to probation. That's a big wide range.
That's a big range that we're looking at here, and of course there's a lot to consider there, as I think you heard in some of what we heard from both sides of this argument. And of course, we don't even know at this point when we'll see a hearing on a sentencing. That all has yet to be determined. There are a lot of motions that could be filed over the next few months.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. And of course, we'll be continuing to follow this story for that sentencing. Thank you, Joe.